So just to begin, for those that have attended any of my previous ones, and other deliverers have also, we've been utilising slido.com. So a really useful education tool to get everybody involved. So when we're thinking about lesson planning and differentiation, firstly, we'll look at the lesson or the session plan itself. So the first question for everybody is, what are the benefits, do you think, of having a lesson or a session plan? So if on your phones, you can head over to slido.com. The event number is J764. And what I will do is I will open the first one. So what are the benefits to having a lesson or a session plan? So give it a bit of thought. You can answer as many times.
Can you put the Slido link in the chat? Because there's no other way to access it.
Yeah, Darren, if you can just type in slido.com and then the number, please. And it's number J764.
Thank you.
So anything at all, what are the benefits of a lesson or a session plan? It's to be prepared. Good start. Thank you for who shared that. Structure and organisation. It's the use of reference, to maintain a clear focus, to have smooth, that you know you're trying to achieve for the children in the lesson, and the teachers are aware of what you're trying to achieve with their class. Great start. Show the school what the plan looks like, and what you're going to do, so you don't have to think on the spot. It has objectives. It's to support you as the deliverer. 100% agree with that. It's to make sure you're organised, so you yourself remember the outcome and the lesson activities itself. It can be a daunting environment at times, and you can forget things. It's something to refer back to. It's to show your aims and also show you being professional. Great answer. To stay on target to the end goal. Another really good answer. It's guidance for yourself to ensure you're delivering the best lesson possible. Love that answer. It's about offering the best experience for every child or every individual in that session for every time possible. Another 30 seconds. Any other benefits? We've had some that are linked to the individual lead in the session. We've had some that are linked to the participants. Key objectives and outcomes is to show competence. Good. Final 10, 15 seconds. Any more to share? Teachers can take proper care by considering the level of previous knowledge of the students in your class. Excellent. Pass on your knowledge to the new generation. On that note, we will stop that one there. So somewhat a philosophical finish, passing on to the next generation. I like that. So lots of really good answers there, all valid. Again, some are linked to the individual and the person leading that session and the benefits it has for them. And also what I really like is that the plan was also considered and commented on the benefits to your participants and to the value and that overall experience and how they will also get something out of it. So your plan is for you and to inform you of what to be done in next steps, and also the benefits to the participants in the session that it'll have on them also. Great start, so thank you for that. So if we think firstly to the outcome of the lesson and session, and a lot of people that shared answers, they touched on this, and the overall purpose and the outcomes. So we need to determine, where does it sit in that medium-term plan or that program overview? So what week are we in the program? Are you midway through? Is it the start? Are you coming towards the end? It's a chance for you to think and reflect on, are you on track? So if I am midway through a term in a school delivering striking and fielding, by week 5, I'd plan to look at forms of competition for them to demonstrate previous learning. If I'm not ready for that point, do I continue to deliver that, or do I have to make modifications to support further for that to come later in the program? So it's firstly to initially think about, where are you in terms of the overall program? Is there relevance, or does it show progression from the previous lesson session? So based on the last session or the last lesson, if it's applicable, how does that feed into this session? And what relevance does it have? Is there synergy? Does it lead on from the week before or the session before? If obviously it's your first session or lesson, that may not be relevant unless you've delivered to them in a previous term or a previous program in which there could be some information that can be utilized for further progression. Will every child be able to participate? So looking at what the content is and what you want it to look like and what you want them to learn, will every child be able to access that is important. And then finally, how will they demonstrate what they are learning and not necessarily doing? So link to the outcome of your session, link to what you're planning to deliver throughout that session or lesson. What is it they will have to do? What do you want to see for them, or what do you want to hear for them to demonstrate what they have learned and not just what they're doing? So an example of that may be if you have a particular outcome that is apply rules to activities, really simple. If a child can tell you what they have played, I played this game, that game, and that game, they've told me what they've done, which is good, but in order to demonstrate what they've learned, they'd have to articulate around applying rules to activities. So it could be they say, well, I played Tom and Jerry and I had to avoid the cat because it was attack defend principles for invasion games, as an example. So it's not always about what they're doing, it's about what they're learning, and you've got to think about how are they going to demonstrate that. With your lesson plan and the differentiation, we need to consider learning styles. So from start to finish, whether it be practical, whether it be theory, classroom based, you have to think about how well are you targeting those 4 different types of learning style. So can anybody give any examples on an introduction to a lesson or a session? How might you deliver that introduction, sharing an outcome that may target all or some of those different learning styles? So if you want to type it in the chat box or unmute yourself, what methods, what ways can you suggest around the introduction?
You could write the learning objective out, have pictures and demonstrations of the session or the task.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Thanks for sharing. And it's a great start. So you could have it wrote. It could be videos. There could be visuals. If it's if you've wrote something out on the board and then you're delivering it via speech, auditory, read, write, visual. So you're hitting a lot of different areas there. Anyone else? Appreciate this is a challenging area and it does get you thinking.
You could demonstrate it without talking through it, so you're just doing it silently.
Brilliant. So it doesn't have to include speech, and it could maybe emphasize that visual and getting them to really watch. Likewise, the other way, if you have got a combination of visual and auditory, some children may not necessarily need that visual because what they hear is how they digest that information. So linking it back to a lesson plan, it's good to think about the different ways of how you can target these learning styles and make sure that all children have access to what you're presenting. Over time, naturally, you will begin to learn and understand that the participants in your sessions or lessons, what they consider to be their main areas of learning and how they learn. So you can utilize that information. Now, for any kinesthetic learners, it may be that your introduction only sort of makes full sense and they've digested it fully once they've started the first practical. So if you know and understand that, it may be, or it would be, what can you plan within that first practical to really emphasize that outcome to those learners who maybe do take things in kinesthetically. Practicals, how can we accommodate those learning styles in practical? So we've touched or we've alluded to kinesthetic already. So some may take it from a demonstration. If there's an activity in place, some children need, or some participants, they need to see it happen. Once they've seen it happen, they fully understand what the expectation is. Any other ways for the practicals?
Get them to show everybody what they're doing.
Peer demonstration. Yeah, peer demonstration, really good. Kinesthetic learners doing it as well will benefit. For some, it may be cue cards, and that links in next to the resources. So what visual cue cards could we have? What verbal instruction may you give? Are there any pieces of literature or resource that they have to read and write down? So it could be a check and challenge where there's a whiteboard and a pen and they have to write down what they have seen, what has happened well or what worked well. And it's same for the plenary, the finishing off. It could be video footage, it could be questions, it could be verbal, it could be peer demonstration, as somebody's already mentioned. So it's just to get you thinking about all these different things and all these learning styles. And again, over time, your participants will have favoured or preferred methods of digesting information. If you're aware of that, brilliant. And then if you're planning in how to accommodate those different styles, you're going to maximise the learning and the understanding within your sessions and lessons. Next, you need to think about your teaching and leading styles. Now, this slide did feature last week in one of my webinars, and I think it's really important to share this. Does anybody want to firstly explain the differences, or do they want to pick one and explain what type of style that is?
Yeah, autocratic. Autocratic is where they've been told what to do by the teacher or coach. This is what you've got to do. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. Where democratic is both of them are talking through it, showing it. They're both making a decision about what they've got to do.
Perfect. Yeah. Laissez-faire
is where the children been given tasks to do, and it's how they're going to carry it out rather than being led by somebody else.
Brilliant. Yeah, really well explained. Thank you for that. So your autocratic is very much you are going to work in that area. This is your equipment. This is the task. You go when I say, you stop when I say. It's very regimental. You then have your democratic, which may be you're going to work in this area. You're going to use this piece of equipment. However, I'm going to let you choose how you manipulate that equipment. And then laissez-faire could be, you know what's expected, go and do it, choose what resource you need, use what space you need, start when you're ready. So there's all these different approaches. Now, to bring it back into planning, to lesson planning, we often have this pre-mindset that every leader of a session or a lesson, they have their preferred style, and when they're planning, it's planned to that style. Now, what we need to think about is understanding what the needs of your participants are. Now, some participants, they need that direction in order to learn and develop. They need an autocratic approach. They need to be told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and supported through that channel. Some need democratic, some need laissez-faire. So when you are planning that session or lesson, again, think about who you're working with and how to maximize their progression and how to maximize that learning. You've got to be able to adapt all three styles to that audience. So it's not having your preferred style and sticking with it and then changing to your needs. You need to adapt and amend to their needs by one of these three styles. So on your plan, if you've got different groups set up, it could be that group one, they have to have the autocratic approach and everything is given to them and then you challenge them as they go. It could be that your next group have a democratic approach. It could be that one group has a laissez-faire approach. It could be that your full group has a democratic approach, but then you can potentially drip feed elements of laissez-faire for individuals. So having a full awareness and understanding of all those three styles and then applying them where necessary and prompting yourself on the plan, that will again inform decisions throughout the session and lesson which ultimately is there to benefit all the participants. So then on the plan, let's now think about the elements. So we need to introduce it, and it's about creating that picture. So we need to think about where it will take place and what will it look like. Can somebody share what their current practice is, or practice they may have seen from others on what an introduction looks like? It could be for an extracurricular session, it could be for a curricular-based session, it could be for an enrichment session. What does that look like? Or
we have 3 different areas set up. So you have your red, yellow, green areas, or red, yellow, white area, and you set them a task to do. So you send them over to their group, get them started, whilst the other groups are starting their activities, and then you're going over there giving them advice on what they need to be doing in the lesson.
Okay, so it's a practical approach. Okay, good. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Darren, anyone in the chat box shared an introduction to a lesson or a session?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, so with that introduction, that is the first opportunity to share what the outcome of the session or the lesson is. So on your plan, it's thinking about where will it be. Some choose to start in a classroom. Some may choose to start on the yard. Some may choose to start in the hall, wherever it may be. So you've got to think about, on that plan, whatever resource you have available or space you have access to, what can you do in that area to present the introduction as best possible? Now, the picture, the visual is a method that I used to use when I was delivering in schools, and it was to fully go through the topic, the skills that we're going to be utilising the session, and then the outcome. What is the outcome of the session? Now, it is wrote in green. It's not very clear on the picture. But the outcome says apply rules to activities, and then underlined is my keyword for that lesson, rules. And then throughout the lesson or the session, it will be, what can you tell me about the outcome or the rules? Why is it so important? Why do we have them in place? And then how have you achieved them? And it's creating that full rounded approach to their learning. So they're not just sort of telling us what they're doing. There's a full understanding of why they're doing it. And then also they can then articulate how to do it. So really creating that picture and setting the scene with that outcome, whatever it may be, it gives them that start to then be able to digest and think about, how am I going to achieve that in the lesson or the session? If you don't have any resources to hand, you know that you don't have the resources. So on your plan, you need to think about and map out how you can get the resources or what you can do differently to present them. It could be use of ICT. It could be a short video on YouTube maybe, which then you then map in some open questions to begin to think about that outcome. So thinking about how you're going to introduce that is really important, because without that introduction, we cannot then measure progress from start to finish. We need to think about the structure of activities. So once they are in the practical environment, how is it structured? So we've had a few people allude already to different ability groups or different areas for different groups. So that's looking at a parallel activity. It could be that the activity is modified. So if you are relatively new to the group and you don't know what to fully expect, it could be common task. Every participant is doing the same. However, you've planned in different modifications so that should a particular person demonstrate a high competence, you've got something to then progress them onto. Likewise, if there's somebody who on the base common task are showing signs of needing additional support, you're planning a modification that goes the other way. It'll support them further by making slight adjustments to accommodate their ability. It could be specific or a separate. So within a topic or a program, you could have separate groups doing completely different work. You may find that they have a different outcome altogether, because on that journey, on that program journey or that scheme of work for the medium-term plan, they're at different points. And rather than give them a common outcome, there may be that one group has an outcome that they need to develop further, and likewise there's a different group who have a separate outcome that they need to develop further. So it doesn't always have to be the same outcome for all. And then finally, it could be an open activity. Everybody takes part. This is very much about inclusivity. Everyone's participating, and you may then link into modifications further down the line. So you need to think about the structure when you're planning that session. Okay, we'll now move on to the starting activity and the warm-up. So this is your first practical opportunity to work towards achieving the outcome. And it's all about making it count. And the visual there is, well, it's supposed to be a game of Snap. Can anybody comment on that starting activity and warm-up? Why that is so important, thinking about your outcome and what you're planning to do? Why is it so important, do we think?
It gives them the first idea of the warm-up and how, even the first idea of the learn objective and how they're going to achieve it.
Brilliant. Perfect answer. It's their first opportunity. So an example I'll use is if you are delivering gymnastics, and in your outcome for that session is perform and link skills with control. And in the main part of your session, you want the participants to create a simple sequence, including jumps, rolls, and balances. However, for the warm-up, you've decided to play Scarecrow Tig. I would question, what relevance does Scarecrow Tig have, A, on the outcome, perform and link skills with control, and B, what relevance does it have to the next part of the session and the main activity? So back to the visual of Snap, it's all about making it relevant and everything feeds into the next phase. So in that example I've just used, gymnastics, perform and link skills with control. Main activity is about performing a simple sequence with jump, roll, balance. Can anybody suggest what a good warm-up activity may be? However simple. If you want to put it in the chat box or if you want to share.
The one in the chat box, get children engaged.
It will get them engaged, good, and it will get them thinking about what's going to be happening later on. They'll be thinking about the outcome. For the warm-up,
You could have them.
Sorry, go on.
You could have them travelling around, and when you shout a word or something, they have to freeze freeze with a body part. So that freeze move balancing on one leg or balancing on two legs or something like that.
Great idea. Great idea. So what it could be is that there's different methods of traveling that they may use in the sequence, but then on command, when you say a number, they have to create a balance with that amount of body parts touching the floor. So that's called balance bingo. It could be that you then, as they're traveling in the area, on command, you provide a type of jump. Now, what can happen then, which we'll get to in a few slides' time, you can begin to assess performance. You can begin to assess how you think they will fare with the relevance of the outcome and the activity that's coming next. And you can also assess what support individuals or groups may need further down in that session. So it's very important on your lesson plan, make that warm-up count. It's not a tick box exercise or I'll get them running for 5 minutes, a few stretches, done. No, use that as the first opportunity to really achieve and promote that outcome and make it relevant to the next activity. So thanks to those that shared. Yeah.
Sorry. Also, could you, instead of shouting out that number body part, show the number up on a whiteboard or something like that, so you've got those other learners visually seeing that number as well?
Yeah, perfect. Another really good idea. So there's ways you can then challenge further. So if they're in different groups, it could be that different groups have a particular number. So red's your number's 4, yellow's your number's 3, blue's your number's 2. It could have some cross-curricular links. So it may be, okay, you have to show me an even numbered balance. If they're in groups, it could be this group. Your total balance number has to be 10. So if there's 5 of them in a group, it could be that they have 2 body parts touching the floor each, or it could be that some have 3, others have 1. So there's a lot of ways you can develop activities like that to challenge accordingly even further. So a really good point to share there. Thank you for that. And again, that first opportunity in that warm-up or starting activity, you can challenge them. It's not a tick box, get them warm. So just bear that in mind when you're planning for that particular area of the session. So now let's look at the structure or the differentiation. So fit for purpose activities utilizing steps. So from that warm up or that starting activity, let's now look at the next part of the session. And steps is a really good model because it's a brilliant prompt to think about ways to challenge accordingly and to differentiate. So in the chat box or over microphone, who can share any space examples? Managing space.
Instead of rectangles and squares, you do ovals and circles. So you're changing the way they're moving in different space and let them work out where their limits are. So they're not allowed out the
shape and size. Yeah, brilliant.
Bigger, smaller spaces as well for different ability groups.
Different size of that space. Excellent. Any other ways? Anything in the chat box, Darren?
No, not on this specific one at the moment.
Okay, no problem. So with the space, sorry, go
on. Could you change the equipment? So say if you're doing gymnastics and they're balancing on a bench, could you flip it over so that it's on the thinner side, or would that pass as equipment?
Yeah, so it's a fair point, and thank you for sharing that. And that would link in with equipment. However, where that equipment is placed and the space available, so it could be that if they were performing a jump and a landing from the bench, it could be if a particular able group have to land in a space that is smaller than another. So it could be that someone has the size of a hoop to land in and stay balanced in, but somebody else has the size of a rubber spot to stay in and balance in. So that would certainly look at space as well. So yeah, really good point. Task. How can we differentiate through the task?
Different tasks make it easier, make it harder for each area or each ability group.
Brilliant.
Like you just alluded on, like balancing on one leg, or balancing on one arm, one leg, sort of thing for different groups. Make the task achievable for each group.
Excellent. So depending on the structure of your session, if it's a parallel, modified, open, whatever type of activity or setup you've got, how can you then modify and develop further? Because that's on your plan. We need to keep challenging accordingly and making it fit for purpose. Really good. Equipment. So I think it was Heather who already mentioned about types of equipment. It can be a size of a ball. It can be the fabric material. It could be additional pieces of equipment such as a visual resource, thinking back to our learning styles. So cue cards with different ways to adapt a session that they can choose. People. So we've alluded to this already. Who are they grouped with? Are they working all together? Are they in ability groups? Are they in mixed groups? Are they working individually? And then finally, the success. What should the success link to?
The activity or learning objective?
Correct, both, yeah. So that success should be within the task. What do I need to demonstrate in order to achieve our outcome? So if it was performing linked skills with balance and control, within that task, if it's a sequence session, run, jump, balance, roll, the success could be lands on 2 feet with minimal movement. It could be smoothly rolls into finishing position. It's a clear target of what they can do to achieve the outcome within the task, and that's how they succeed. And making that really clear on your plan. It could be the same for all. It could be different dependent on the groups that you have and what challenge or task they've been given. So making it clear, but ultimately linking everything back to that outcome. Whilst we are delivering and observing our participants, what type of assessment for those that attended last week, or if you know already, the type of assessment began with F? Any ideas? Formative. Thank you. So on your plan, it's now a case of evidencing and documenting whilst participants are active and engaged in the session or the lesson. What can you be doing to then check and challenge and progress further? Formative assessment.
Asking them what they're doing well, or asking others in their class what that certain group are doing well and how they can improve.
That's it. Getting their insight as well. So we will come to that. So thanks for sharing. So formative assessment is assessing pupils while learning is happening. In your plan, are you giving yourself opportunity just to step back, watch what's happening? What can you see? What can you hear? Why it's so important is formative assessment engages pupils in their own learning, and it empowers the pupils to take control of their own learning. So this again featured last week in progress and assessment. So the reason we do it is based on what you can see and hear, you can challenge accordingly. You can make changes that are planned and that will be fit for purpose. That will then enhance their progression within that session. How do we do it? So this is already being shared, which is brilliant. Use of open questions on the outcome, on the content linked to the outcome. What competence is being displayed? If somebody is clearly finding something difficult, don't let them suffer in silence and struggle. Make that change to make it more fit for purpose. Likewise, if someone's finding something quite easy, make that challenge, make it more fit for purpose. What behaviours are you identifying? If there's a particular task you have planned and it's not happening, it's not working for some or more than some, what are you going to do? Have you got a plan B? Have you got any modifications you could apply to turn that around and get engagement back, which sort of links into willingness to participate? Pupil feedback as well. This has just been shared. Ask them, what could I do to challenge you further? How could this activity challenge further? What could we change in the activity to make it easier or to simplify for a new participant? Get them to articulate on it. Get them to have input on their learning and ask them and challenge them on it. Because it's amazing how many participants I've worked with over the years that have had such good ideas. Run with it. And on your plan, you may prompt, when are you going to ask an open question? Who are you going to ask it to? Is it stop-start for the whole group? Or is it intervention with different groups whilst the other groups continue to be physically active whilst you've got your eye on them, of course? So there's ways to formative assess. I won't go through them, but there's some examples on those open questions. On my lesson plans that I used to do, I'd write them in. I'm very much a person that needs somewhat of an autocratic preparation. I need everything on my plan for me to then go and use in the session. It's not to say I was autocratic with my groups. I applied all three styles, whatever was fit for purpose, but on my plan, I needed everything there in black and white. So for me, it was mapping in open questions. When am I going to ask them? Who might I ask them to? If they're on the plan, I may ask them sooner, but they're there as a prompt to remind me to ask. Tell me about your outcome. How are you achieving it? Why is it so important, either the keyword from the outcome or the outcome itself? Who can you see achieving it? How are they achieving it? If they're picking a friend, and then when they articulate how they're achieving it, if you know that's not correct, you need to then have further intervention on that to support accordingly. So mapping those in on that plan. Again, some may have seen this from last week. There's an example of a progressive activity and formative assessment. Not all pupils may start at level 1, but it may be that some begin at level 1 because that's fit for purpose for them, but you have a different group that starts at level 4 because you're confident they can begin there and be challenged. It could be that some groups move up the steps, but if there's a particular group on level 6, but you think, actually, I'm not quite seeing what I need to, and it's not really fit for purpose, drop it down a level. You may not tell them levels and if they're going up or down, but you have it planned in what these modifications are in order to progress and to challenge them accordingly. So that is just a simple example using a ball and dribbling action or bounce cats action. You can apply it to anything. I used an example last week on striking and fielding. If it comes to competition time, it may be that step 1 is the ball is hit off a cone and fielders get the ball to a particular part on the field to stop the batter from running. Level 2 may be that the ball is drop fed from the side, so it's safe, and then the batter hits that ball, and then the fielders have a choice whether to get it back to area A or area B. It could be that level 3 is that the ball is bowled to them via an underarm action, and there's a rounders principle, and then the fielders have to make decisions on what base to throw to. So this principle can be applied to any situation, but the idea is on your plan, do you have it planned what these modifications are, where they can go based on what they're showing you and how it's all linked to the outcome? So this outcome, again, for this example on the screen, the outcome may be perform and link skills. So they're all working to the same outcome. However, how they get there is different because it's matched to their ability. Another slide. So timings are important on a plan. You need to know how long you will spend on each area. However, if you have 20 minutes assigned for your main content, if after 5 minutes you have planned for all to be going on to a different activity, just because 5 minutes has passed, it doesn't mean that that change is fit for purpose. So it may be that the main session that is 20 minutes long planned, after 30 seconds, there's an individual or small group who are ready to be further. Do it then. Don't wait till 5 minutes to progress them, but then also progress others that still can't achieve what you've set. And the purpose of the visual below is that for the game here on the left, let's say that's level 1, you can only progress to level 2, which is harder once you've done it. So don't progress your participants based on timings. Progress them when they're ready to progress. And within that 20-minute slot you may have for the overall session, the main activity, some may progress after a minute, some may progress after 5, some may need challenge and support and progress after 10. But so long as it is a fit for purpose progression, the timing shouldn't matter. So just bearing that in mind on your plan. And it's about performance and not time. With your differentiation, be consistent. The input you have, coaching points in the activity. Is it fit for purpose for your groups? Have you planned what they will be doing, or is it common task for all if they're new to you? Feedback, what can you see and hear? Is it working? Is it too easy? Is it too difficult? That's then when you step in and you change. That's where further differentiation and further support comes in. Based on what you've seen, I'm going to make this modification. I'm going to add this rule. I'm going to change your equipment to this piece of equipment. Step back again. That's where learning takes place. When they're learning, they're progressing. And then repeat the cycle. Do it again. Monitor each group that's in your session, or if it's one group working together, stick to that process. Is that on your plan? What you will change, whether it's equipment-based, task-based, space-based. Finally, on the plan, guys, the plenary. Paint that picture. You've created it at the start of the session. Now you've got to paint it. Get them to have full input in that plenary. Is it a pair and share where they discuss what they're taken on a school iPad, for example. So some learners are able to look at what they have been doing and what others have been doing. Others may listen to what's happened. You may give whiteboards out and some write down what they have done. So again, accommodating all those styles in that plenary is their last opportunity to measure and monitor how well they have learned in that session or lesson. Just to finish off, so education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. It's a habit to tell people what to do. It's often a habit to say how, but for a lot, it's a rarity on why. We need to, on our plan, and when we're differentiating, we need to constantly promote them thinking and not telling them what to think or what to do, but how and why, and giving them as much ownership and input as possible and where necessary. And again, all that can be documented on your plan. Your plan is not about war and peace. It can be bullet pointed, it can be simple prompts, little notes on open questions to add. You may type up your plan, but then when you've printed it, annotate it. Red colour pen, circle, right, open question on this particular area. So really use it to get them to think and have input. So I appreciate everybody's attendance. The final activity, I just want to hear some more from you all before we finish. If we can go back to slido.com, event number J764, can you tell me, based on this webinar, what 3 things that you will factor in to your next plan? So it could be something that you already do, but you're going to do more of it. It could be something that's a brand new concept to you that you're going to make it your responsibility to include. It can be 1 or 2 things. It doesn't have to be 3. It can also be 4 or 5. So what are you going to factor into your next plan? What type of things will you include? Will it be linked to learning styles? Will it be linked to your teaching style? Will it be linked to the differentiation of a progressive activity, the STEPS model? What type of things? Will it be the resources that you use? How will you accommodate the different learning styles when you do an introduction? So slido.com, number J764. Darren, have we anything in the chat box?
No, mate, not at the moment.
Okay, how to use learning styles, plan modified activities. Thank you for that. Incorporate the learning styles. So really important that we don't automatically and not intentionally, but prevent some participants from learning based on how you've presented your information. So you need to plan in how you will accommodate those styles. Plan to use plenty of resources. Thank you for whoever shared that. Anything further? It can be 1 thing. You may already do it, but you may want to do more. So changing shape and space. Get the children to work differently in their groups and give peer feedback. Change equipment more often based on ability. You do it, but you can do it more. Thank you for that and being honest. Use a whiteboard and visual aids at the end. Print your plan and annotate on the paper for the lesson. I used to do that myself. I found it really useful. Loads of different resources on the session to make it easier and harder. Thank you for sharing that. I'll give it another minute or so. Implement ability groups more frequently. Good. That may not come straight away if you're new to a group. However, in time, the more you get to know them, the more you may then begin to map out what children will work best with others in order to give them a fit for purpose activity. So ability groups is a good thing to note on your plan. Final few seconds. It is a difficult question. And for some who maybe haven't shared, I take that as a positive because it's getting you thinking and it's getting you to go out your comfort zone maybe and think in future. So you may come away from this call and things start to be thought more later on. That is fine. More alternative equipment and incorporate teaching styles.